Most personal finance advice focuses obsessively on how to make money and how to save money. But there's a third piece that's equally important, yet rarely discussed with any depth: how to spend money. Not just spending less, but spending well. Spending in ways that actually make your life richer rather than just making you poorer. Today, we're diving into The Art of Spending Money by Morgan Housel, best-selling author of The Psychology of Money. While most books treat spending as the enemy of wealth, Housel takes a radically different approach. Spending money is one of the most important skills you can develop because it directly determines the quality of your life. The question isn't whether to spend money. It's how to spend it in ways that genuinely improve your well-being. What makes Housel's perspective so valuable is that he understands something most financial advisors miss. The goal of money isn't to have money. The goal is to live a good life. And living a good life requires spending money, the right amounts, on the right things, at the right times, for the right reasons. Get this wrong, and you're either miserable now or struggling later. Get it right, and you can enjoy life today while building security for tomorrow. This book isn't about permission to be reckless with money. It's about understanding that every dollar you spend is a choice about what kind of life you're building. Some spending creates lasting value and happiness. Other spending creates temporary pleasure followed by regret. The difference between these two types of spending is what determines whether you feel rich or poor, regardless of your income. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll explore Housel's framework for spending money wisely, understanding the real purpose of money, identifying spending that actually improves your life, avoiding the traps that make people feel poor despite earning well, using money to buy time and freedom, balancing present enjoyment with future security, and making spending decisions aligned with your actual values rather than social pressure. If you've ever felt guilty about spending money on yourself, if you've bought things that didn't make you happier, if you've wondered why your income keeps rising but you don't feel any wealthier, or if you simply want to get more life satisfaction per dollar spent, this is for you. Let's master the art of spending money. Chapter 1. The Real Purpose of Money. Housel opens with a fundamental question most people never seriously consider. What is money actually for? The obvious answer, to buy things, misses the deeper point. Money is a tool for building the life you want. But most people never define what that life looks like, so they spend money randomly, guided by advertising, social comparison, and impulse rather than intention. The author argues that money has three legitimate purposes. First, to provide security, covering basic needs, handling emergencies, and removing constant financial stress. Second, to create freedom, buying control over your time and choices rather than being forced into situations by financial necessity. Third, to facilitate experiences and relationships that bring genuine fulfillment. Any spending that doesn't serve one of these three purposes is probably waste. Housel emphasizes that these purposes exist in a hierarchy. Security comes first. You can't enjoy freedom or experiences if you're constantly worried about survival. Once you have adequate security, freedom becomes paramount. This is what actually transforms quality of life. And finally, with security and freedom established, you can optimize spending for experiences and fulfillment. The mistake most people make is inverting this hierarchy. They sacrifice security for immediate consumption. They trade freedom for lifestyle inflation, earning more, but spending it all on things that don't actually improve their lives. They chase status and material possessions instead of experiences and relationships that create lasting satisfaction. Housel shares research on what actually makes people happy. Beyond a certain income threshold, where basic needs are comfortably met, additional money produces diminishing returns on happiness. But this doesn't mean money stops mattering. It means how you use money matters more than how much you have. A person earning $70,000 who spends wisely can be happier than someone earning $200,000 who spends poorly. The key insight is that spending money well requires knowing yourself. What actually makes you happy? What do you genuinely value versus what you've been conditioned to want? Housel observes that many people spend decades working to afford lifestyles they don't actually enjoy, buying things to impress people they don't even like, pursuing conventional markers of success that leave them feeling empty. The author provides a framework for clarifying your relationship with money. First, write down what you want your ideal day to look like. Not some day when you're retired, just a regular Tuesday. What time do you wake up? What do you do? Who are you with? Where are you? Now ask, what financial resources would make this day possible? This exercise reveals what you actually need for money versus what you've been chasing. Second, identify your minimum viable income, the amount needed to cover necessities plus a small buffer. Knowing this number reduces anxiety and provides clarity. You realize you need less than you thought, which paradoxically makes you feel wealthier. When your needs are modest and clearly defined, income above that threshold becomes pure freedom. Third, define what wealth means to you personally. For some, it's never having to think about money. For others, it's being able to help family or causes they care about. For others still, it's having ultimate control over their time. There's no universal right answer, but having no answer means you're chasing an undefined target you'll never hit. Housel emphasizes that the purpose of money is not to accumulate the most money. It's to build the life you want. This seems obvious, but most people's actual behavior suggests they've forgotten it. They optimize for net worth while neglecting life satisfaction. They defer happiness to some future date when they'll have enough, not realizing that enough is a state of mind, not a dollar amount. The chapter concludes with a provocative question. If you continue your current relationship with money, your earning, spending, and saving patterns for the next 20 years, will you end up with the life you want? If the answer is no, something needs to change. And often what needs to change isn't how much you make or save. It's how intentionally and wisely you spend. Chapter 2. The Spending That Matters. Housel dedicates substantial attention to identifying spending that genuinely improves quality of life versus spending that seems like it should but doesn't. This distinction is crucial because most people consistently spend on things that don't actually make them happier while neglecting spending that would. The author introduces what he calls life-improving spending, purchases that compound value over time. First on this list is spending that buys back your time. Housel argues this is often the highest return use of money, yet the one most people resist. Hiring someone to clean your house, outsourcing tasks you hate, paying for convenience that saves hours, These purchases literally buy back pieces of your life. The math is straightforward but powerful. If you earn $50 per hour and can pay someone $20 per hour to do a task you hate, you're gaining $30 of value per hour plus eliminating something that drains your energy. Yet, people often mow their own lawns, do their own home repairs, and handle tasks they despise to save money while spending that same money on things that add zero value. Second, spending on experiences rather than possessions. Housel cites extensive research showing that experiences provide more lasting happiness than material goods. The new car thrill fades within weeks. The memory of a meaningful trip lasts years. Experiences can't be directly compared to others, reducing the status competition that makes possession-based spending unsatisfying. And experiences often involve other people, strengthening relationships in ways that possessions don't. But Housel adds an important nuance. Not all experiences are equal. Expensive luxury experiences aren't necessarily better than modest ones. What matters is whether the experience is meaningful to you. A camping trip with close friends might provide more lasting satisfaction than a luxury resort vacation alone. The value is in the memory and connection, not the price tag. Third, spending that improves your health. Housel argues this is criminally undervalued. Quality food, gym memberships you actually use, preventive medical care, stress reduction. These purchases pay dividends for decades. Yet people often skimp on health spending to afford cars or clothes they don't need. The irony is that poor health can destroy wealth faster than any other factor, making health spending some of the highest return money you can allocate. Fourth, spending on education and skills. This includes both formal education and informal learning, books, courses, workshops, coaching. Housel emphasizes that investing in yourself has unlimited returns because you take the skills with you forever, and they often increase your earning power far beyond their cost. A $1,000 course that increases your income by $5,000 per year pays for itself in months and continues paying forever. Fifth, spending that strengthens relationships. Housel observes that the happiest people are those with strong social connections. Yet, modern life often isolates us. Spending money to facilitate relationships, hosting dinners, taking trips with friends or family, living near loved ones even if it costs more, creates value that material possessions never can. The man who lives in a bigger house but sees his grandchildren once a year is poorer than the man in a smaller house who sees them weekly. Housel contrasts this with spending that feels good momentarily but creates no lasting value. Expensive cars that you quickly adapt to. Designer clothes you wear a few times. Restaurant meals you barely remember. The latest gadgets that excite you for a week. This isn't bad spending. It's just low-return spending that people often prioritize over high-return spending. The author introduces the concept of spending rate of return. For every dollar you spend, ask, how much lasting value does this create? A $10 book you read and apply might have 1,000% return. A $3,000 watch might have a negative return if it creates stress about theft or damage. Start thinking about spending through this lens, and your patterns will shift dramatically. One powerful framework Housel provides. Categorize every purchase as either appreciating, depreciating, or neutral. Appreciating purchases gain value over time. Education, health, meaningful experiences, time-saving services that let you earn more or enjoy life more. Depreciating purchases lose value. Most possessions, status symbols, impulse buys. Neutral purchases serve a function without gaining or losing value. Basic necessities, tools you use regularly. The goal isn't to only make appreciating purchases. That's unrealistic. It's to ensure appreciating purchases comprise the largest portion of your spending, while depreciating purchases are minimized and carefully chosen. Most people's spending is inverted, mostly depreciating, little appreciating, which explains why they never feel satisfied despite spending freely. Housel also addresses the question of whether you should treat yourself. His answer is nuanced. Yes, but be strategic. The treat should be something you genuinely enjoy, not something you think you should enjoy. It should be occasional enough to remain special rather than becoming expected. And it should fit within a spending framework that still serves your larger goals. Random treating leads to lifestyle inflation and regret. Intentional treating enhances life. The chapter concludes with a challenge. Audit your spending from the past 3 months. Categorize each expense as appreciating, depreciating, or neutral. Calculate the percentage in each category. For most people, this exercise is shocking. They discover they're spending vast amounts on depreciating purchases while neglecting appreciating ones. The awareness alone begins shifting behavior toward spending that actually improves life. Chapter 3, The Spending Traps That Make You Poor. Housel identifies patterns of spending that reliably create financial stress and dissatisfaction regardless of income level. These traps catch almost everyone at some point, and recognizing them is essential to avoiding them. The first trap is lifestyle inflation, increasing spending automatically as income rises. You get a raise and immediately upgrade your apartment, car, and dining habits to match. Your income rises by 30%, but your spending rises by 30%. Leaving you no wealthier and often more stressed because your elevated lifestyle now depends on maintaining that higher income. Housel explains the psychology behind this trap. Humans adapt quickly to improved circumstances, a phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. The nicer apartment feels amazing for weeks, then becomes normal. Now, you need the next upgrade to feel that excitement again. This creates a treadmill where you're constantly chasing more without ever arriving at satisfaction. The solution isn't to never improve your lifestyle as you earn more. That's unrealistic and unnecessary. It's to let lifestyle improvements lag significantly behind income increases. When you get a 20% raise, increase spending by 5% and invest or save the rest. This allows you to enjoy rising income while actually building wealth, rather than just appearing to have it. The second trap is status spending. Buying things primarily to signal success or belonging, rather than because you genuinely want them. Housel argues this is possibly the most expensive trap because status is relative and therefore unwinnable. You buy a luxury car to signal success, but there's always someone with a more expensive car. You're competing in a game with no finish line. The insidious nature of status spending is that it feels rational in the moment. You tell yourself the expensive watch is an investment, or the luxury vacation is making memories. But if you're honest, the primary motivation is how it will look to others or how it signals your success. This type of spending has extremely low return on satisfaction because the pleasure comes from others' perceived reactions, which are usually far less than you imagine. The third trap is convenience creep, constantly choosing convenience options that add up to enormous costs. Food delivery instead of cooking, taxis instead of public transit, paying for services you could easily do yourself. Each individual choice seems minor, but collectively they can cost thousands per month. Housel isn't against convenience. He's against unconscious convenience creep, where you're not even noticing how much you're spending for minor time savings. The fourth trap is subscription accumulation. Streaming services, apps, memberships, subscriptions each cost $5 to $50 monthly, which seems trivial. But 20 subscriptions at an average of $20 each cost $480 monthly, or nearly $6,000 annually. Most people have multiple subscriptions they rarely use, but forget to cancel. This spending is particularly pernicious because it's automatic and invisible. The fifth trap is deal spending, buying things you don't need because they're on sale. Housel shares a simple truth. You don't save money by buying discounted things you wouldn't have bought at full price. You spend money. A 50% off item you don't need isn't a deal, it's waste. The best financial decision is often not buying at all, regardless of the discount. The sixth trap is emotional spending, using purchases to manage emotions. Bored, so you browse online stores. Stressed, so you treat yourself. Sad, so you shop for comfort. Happy, so you celebrate with spending. Housel explains that when spending becomes your primary tool for emotional regulation, you're both hemorrhaging money and not actually addressing the emotions, which return and trigger more spending. The author provides a framework for identifying if you've fallen into emotional spending. Delay 24 hours before any non-essential purchase. If you still want it tomorrow, it might be genuine. If you forgot about it, it was emotional. This simple rule catches probably 80% of regrettable purchases before they happen. The seventh trap is keeping up with normal. Housel observes that modern consumption standards have risen dramatically. What's now considered normal? Frequent restaurant meals, new cars every few years, latest technology, multiple streaming services would have been luxury lifestyle 30 years ago. But because everyone around you lives this way, it feels like necessity rather than choice. You're unwittingly spending luxury amounts on what you perceive as normal. The chapter concludes with Housel's observation that these traps share a common feature. They disconnect spending from actual value. You're spending reactively to signal, to adapt, to conform, to medicate emotions, rather than intentionally to build the life you want. The solution is making spending decisions consciously and asking before each purchase, what value does this actually create for my life? If you can't articulate a clear answer, don't buy it. Chapter 4. Buying Time and Freedom. Housel considers this the most important chapter in the book, because it addresses what he believes is the highest and best use of money. Buying control over your time and life. This is the difference between being rich and feeling rich. The author starts with a provocative claim. Time and freedom are more valuable than any possession, yet most people's spending patterns suggest they prioritize possessions over time. They buy expensive cars, but accept brutal commutes. They accumulate stuff, but have no time to enjoy it. They optimize for consumption while sacrificing autonomy. Housel introduces the concept of time wealth, having control over how you spend your hours. Someone earning less but with complete control over their schedule may be wealthier in the ways that matter than someone earning more but trapped in obligations. The key is ensuring your spending habits support time wealth rather than undermining it. The first principle of buying time: reduce or eliminate commutes. Housel argues that commuting is one of the highest costs in modern life, both financially and psychologically. An hour commute each way is 10 hours weekly, 500 plus hours annually, nearly a month of waking hours spent traveling to work. If you can live closer to work, even at higher housing cost, the value can be immense. Or if you can negotiate remote work, potentially transforming your entire lifestyle. The math often favors this trade, even when it's not obvious. Paying an extra $500 monthly to live near work eliminates 10 hours weekly of commute time. If that time is worth $25 per hour to you, whether in earning potential, life enjoyment, or stress reduction, you break even. Any value above that, and you're coming out ahead. The second principle: buy out of tasks you hate. Housel emphasizes that different people hate different tasks, so this is personal. But whatever tasks drain your energy or fill you with dread, seriously consider paying someone else to do them. The mental and emotional relief often exceeds the monetary cost. This doesn't mean outsourcing everything. It means identifying the tasks where the pain of doing them yourself exceeds the pain of paying someone else. For some people, that's house cleaning. For others, it's yard work or car maintenance or meal preparation. The goal is removing energy drains so you can focus on activities that actually matter to you. The third principle: invest in flexibility and options. Housel argues that flexibility is undervalued. The ability to take time off when needed, to move if opportunities arise, to pivot when circumstances change. These capabilities are enormously valuable, but require financial reserves and lifestyle discipline. If you're locked into expensive obligations, you sacrifice flexibility for consumption. He recommends maintaining what he calls a freedom fund, savings beyond your emergency fund specifically designated for buying freedom and options. This might mean turning down a higher-paying job you'd hate in favor of a lower-paying one you'd enjoy, knowing your freedom fund provides the buffer. It might mean taking a sabbatical or starting a business. The point is having resources specifically allocated to freedom rather than having all money committed to lifestyle. The fourth principle: be willing to pay for control. Housel discusses how many people choose situations that pay slightly more but provide no control, over situations that pay slightly less but offer autonomy. The corporate job that pays 20% more than freelancing but requires rigid schedules and approval for everything. The career with a higher ceiling but complete dependence on an employer's goodwill. He argues that for most people, the additional income from sacrificing control gets consumed by lifestyle inflation anyway, leaving you no wealthier but far less free. Better to earn less but have control, keep expenses modest, and enjoy actually owning your time. The author shares personal examples of choosing time over money, turning down lucrative opportunities that would require excessive travel away from family, living in a smaller house to avoid mortgage stress that would force accepting any work to make payments. These choices meant earning less, but having more control, which increased quality of life dramatically. Housel also addresses the relationship between time wealth and retirement. Many people tolerate miserable jobs with the promise of retirement decades later. But this trades the best years of your life, when you have health and energy, for theoretical freedom at the end. A better approach is designing life to have autonomy throughout, even if it means working longer, but enjoying the journey. The chapter concludes with Housel's framework for evaluating any financial decision through the lens of time. Does this purchase or commitment give me more control over my time or less? Does it increase my flexibility or reduce it? Does it create obligations that limit my freedom or remove obligations that were limiting me? Use these questions as filters, and you'll make very different spending decisions than most people. Chapter 5. Balancing Today and Tomorrow. One of the most challenging aspects of spending money wisely is balancing enjoyment today with security tomorrow. Housel addresses this tension directly, arguing that both extremes, pure consumption and pure saving, create unsatisfying lives. The author starts by challenging the conventional personal finance narrative that portrays spending as bad and saving as good. This black and white framing causes people to feel guilty about any spending, which is both unrealistic and unhealthy. Alternatively, people who reject this narrative sometimes swing to the opposite extreme, spending freely without regard for the future. Housel proposes a more nuanced framework. Money has different values at different life stages and for different purposes. $1 spent on meaningful experiences in your 20s might provide more lifetime value than that dollar invested. $1 saved in your 40s when you have dependents and obligations might be more valuable than $1 spent on luxury items. The art is allocating money wisely across time based on circumstances and values. The first principle: establish your baseline security. Housel argues you can't enjoy spending if you're constantly anxious about the future. Before optimizing spending for present enjoyment, ensure you have adequate emergency savings, manageable debt, and progress toward retirement. The exact amounts depend on personal circumstances, but the principle is universal. Security first, optimization second. Once security is established, spending guilt should largely disappear. If you're consistently saving an adequate percentage for the future and have your security foundation in place, spending the rest on things that enhance your life is not just acceptable. It's the entire point of having money. The second principle: spend more on your life today than you think you should. This surprises people coming from Housel, but he's serious. Many people, especially natural savers, underinvest in present experience. They defer so aggressively that they sacrifice health, relationships, and opportunities that can't be recovered later. Money in retirement is worth far less than money during your peak health and energy years. Housel shares the example of someone who saves aggressively from age 25 to 65, then tries to enjoy their wealth, but lacks the health and energy for the experiences they deferred. Contrast this with someone who saves adequately, but also spends meaningfully on experiences throughout their life. The second person has less wealth at 65, but more total life satisfaction across all 65 years. The key is adequately. You still need to save enough for security and eventual retirement. But many people save excessively while living minimally, which is as much a mistake as spending excessively while saving inadequately. The third principle: The right balance is personal and changes over time. Housel emphasizes that there is no universal correct saving rate or spending pattern. Someone in their 20s with high earning potential might reasonably save less and spend more on experiences and skill development. Someone in their 50s with children and aging parents might need to save more aggressively. Someone who genuinely enjoys their work might care less about early retirement and therefore save less. The mistake is following generic advice without considering your specific situation, values, and goals. Financial planning should be personalized, not cookie-cutter. The fourth principle: money is finite, time is finite, but they're not equivalent. You can always potentially earn more money. You cannot create more time. This asymmetry should influence spending decisions. Spending money to save time is often a trade worth making. Spending time to save money is often a trade worth avoiding, especially as you age, and time becomes increasingly precious. Housel recommends calculating your time value, roughly your hourly earnings after tax. Then use this as a benchmark. If you're spending 2 hours to save $30, but your time value is $40 per hour, you're making a bad trade. This doesn't mean always choosing convenience. Sometimes the activity itself has value beyond the time spent. But when it's pure time-money trade-off, be honest about the math. The fifth principle: regret runs both directions. People often fear spending money they might need later, the regret of spending too much. But Housel argues that too much and too little spending both create regret. The person who sacrificed all enjoyment to die rich has failed as badly as the person who enjoyed everything and died broke. The goal is dying with approximately the right amount, having lived well throughout life without creating financial stress. The chapter concludes with Housel's suggestion to think in terms of seasons. Your financial life has different seasons with different appropriate approaches. Early career might emphasize investing in skills and experiences. Family years might emphasize security and stability. Pre-retirement might emphasize aggressive wealth building. Retirement is for thoughtfully spending down what you've built. Each season has its appropriate balance of spending and saving. The mistake is using one season's strategy throughout all seasons. Chapter 6, Spending Aligned with Values. In the final section, Housel addresses what he considers the master key to spending well, ensuring your spending patterns align with your actual values rather than adopted values, social pressure, or unconscious defaults. The author starts with an observation. If you looked at someone's bank statement, you'd know what they actually value, regardless of what they claim to value. Spending patterns reveal true priorities. The person who says family is most important, but spends every weekend working, is revealing their real priority. The person who says health matters, but spends nothing on quality food or exercise, is revealing theirs. This isn't judgment, it's awareness. The gap between stated values and spending patterns creates cognitive dissonance and unhappiness. You feel like you're not living authentically because you're not. Closing this gap requires either changing your spending or being honest about your actual values. Housel provides a framework for aligning spending with values. First, explicitly identify your top 5 values. Not what you think you should value or what others value, what actually matters most to you. For some, it's family. For others, freedom or creativity or health or adventure. There's no right answer, but there must be an honest answer. Second, audit your spending from the past 3 months. What percentage of discretionary spending supports each of your stated top values? For most people, this exercise is uncomfortable. They discover they're spending substantial money on things unrelated to their values, while underspending on what supposedly matters most. Third, create a values-based spending plan. Allocate spending deliberately to support your stated values. If family is your top value, spending on activities with family, living near family, or creating family experiences should be a major category. If health is your top value, spending on nutrition, fitness, and preventive care should be protected, while spending on things that undermine health should be minimized. Housel emphasizes that this isn't about judgment of particular values. If status genuinely matters to you more than experiences, own that and spend accordingly. If luxury brings you genuine joy, allocate money to luxury without guilt. The problem isn't what you value, it's claiming to value one thing while spending in ways that contradict it. The author addresses social pressure, which he identifies as the biggest obstacle to values-aligned spending. Humans are social creatures programmed to seek belonging and avoid exclusion. When everyone around you spends in certain ways, deviating feels risky even when it aligns with your values. You skip the expensive group dinners because you'd rather spend that money on a hobby, but you feel excluded and judged. Housel's advice: find your people. Seek out communities and friendships with people whose values and spending patterns align with yours. If you value experiences over possessions, cultivate friendships with people who'd rather go hiking than shopping. If you value financial independence, build relationships with people who prioritize saving over status. This removes the pressure to spend against your values and creates positive reinforcement for values-aligned choices. One powerful concept Housel introduces is spending identity. Just as people have identity around their career or interests, you should have clarity about your spending identity. Are you someone who values experiences, quality over quantity, convenience and time, status and impression, simple living? There's no right answer, but having a clear identity makes individual spending decisions easier because you're not starting from scratch each time. The author also addresses the challenge of partnerships. When two people with different values or spending identities share finances, conflict is inevitable unless they explicitly address it. Housel recommends couples have honest conversations about values, create space for each person to spend according to their values within agreed boundaries, and find overlapping values to invest in together. He shares the example of a couple where one valued travel and the other valued home comfort. Rather than constant conflict about every spending decision, they agreed to allocate specific budgets to each priority. The travel lover could spend their budget on trips without judgment. The home lover could spend theirs on home improvements without judgment, and neither felt resentful because the system was fair and explicit. Housel also addresses changing values. What you value at 25 isn't what you'll value at 45. Your spending patterns should evolve as your values evolve. The mistake is maintaining spending patterns from a previous life stage because they're familiar or expected. Regular reflection on whether your current spending aligns with your current values prevents this drift. The chapter concludes with Housel's most important insight. Spending money well is not about following rules or achieving some objective standard. It's about intentionality and alignment. When your spending aligns with your values, supports your goals, and reflects conscious choices rather than defaults or pressures, you'll feel wealthy regardless of the absolute amounts involved. And when there's misalignment, you'll feel poor no matter how much you earn or own. We've explored Morgan Housel's complete framework for the art of spending money, understanding money's real purpose, identifying spending that genuinely improves life, avoiding the traps that create financial stress, using money to buy time and freedom, balancing present and future, and ensuring spending aligns with your actual values. The power of Housel's approach is that it reframes spending from a necessary evil or a guilty pleasure into a skill, perhaps the most important financial skill, because it directly determines quality of life. You can be brilliant at earning and saving, but if you're terrible at spending, you'll never build a satisfying life. Let's recap the core principles. Money exists to create security, freedom, and fulfillment. Ensure your spending serves these purposes. Spend on appreciating purchases that gain value over time rather than depreciating ones that lose it. Avoid the spending traps of lifestyle inflation, status competition, and emotional purchasing. Use money to buy back your time and control. Balance present enjoyment with future security. Both extremes create regret. And above all, ensure your spending patterns align with your genuine values rather than adopted ones. Here's your action plan. First, complete the values audit. List your top 5 values. Then audit your spending to see if your money is following your values. For most people, this reveals significant misalignment that's creating dissatisfaction. Second, categorize your regular spending as appreciating, depreciating, or neutral. Calculate the percentage in each category. Third, identify one spending trap you've fallen into and create a specific plan to escape it. The beautiful truth is that spending money well doesn't require earning more. It requires spending more intentionally. Many people earning modest incomes who spend wisely feel wealthier and more satisfied than people earning substantially more who spend poorly. The difference isn't the amount, it's the alignment between spending and values. Remember Housel's central message. You're not trying to maximize your wealth. You're trying to build the life you actually want. Money is just the tool. Spending is how you use that tool. And like any tool, it can be used skillfully or clumsily. Most people use it clumsily, which explains why so many people feel financially stressed despite earning comfortable incomes. If this summary changed how you think about spending money, let me know in the comments what insight resonated most or what spending pattern you're going to change. And if you want the complete depth of Housel's wisdom with more examples and frameworks, pick up The Art of Spending Money. It might be the financial book that actually improves your life, rather than just your bank balance. Until next time, remember, every dollar you spend is a vote for the kind of life you're building. Spend on what matters. Skip what doesn't. Buy time and freedom whenever possible. And never feel guilty about spending aligned with your genuine values. That's not wasteful. That's the entire point of having money. Thank you for watching.